evening, and sorry about that glitch. So as I was telling, like any passionate entrepreneur, we thought we have cracked it, and this is the next best invention after slice of bread. However, the ecosystem was not ready. We were using proprietary solutions, all the moving parts around us: regulation, compliance, privacy, security, technology. They were not in the same state that we wanted them to be or we assumed to be. Obviously, could not accelerate the adoption of the innovation. Fast forward to today. As entrepreneurs, all of us get excited by the huge opportunities in front of us, enabled by multiple factors. This has been talked about in the sessions before also. Availability of huge amount of data coming from every possible source. Huge computing power through cloud and hardware improvements. Proven distributed computing and working models. Phenomenal advances in every possible technology. Right? So all tempting us to think that all the problems are solvable easily. Of course, it's not always the case, right? So when it comes to fintech and related areas, there are a whole lot of other factors that come into play. And they need to line up and fall in place for these solutions to work, for these innovations to work. It's not enough if I, as an entrepreneur, come up with a fancy algorithm or a solution in a standalone mode. The entire ecosystem, regulation, compliance, privacy, security, policies, so all of those need to be in place. See, as all of us know, there is a huge amount of data. And this data is coming from every possible directions. The pandemic obviously increased this velocity. Now, all of this again, in a way, misleading people to conclude that existing hard problems can be solved with all this data that is available. And advances in technologies such as ML or NLP or AI and all of that stuff. Yes, availability of this kind of data, coupled with some of these new advances in these enabling technologies, definitely help us solve some of the problems that were not possible earlier. Yes, this looks promising, but it's definitely miles to go before we can celebrate. So as a fintech leader, I'll just take an example. Perfios handles huge amount of data on a daily basis. But not all this data is directly usable. We get tampered data, fraudulent data, unreadable data, photocopies, scans, completely unreliable data. So when people say data, it's made up of all of this. Just to give you an example, in the lending space, for example, in spite of all this so-called digital transformation, digital adoption, so only 13 to 14% of transactions are digital based. Rest of it is still based on legacy paper-based manual systems. So if an innovator develops a fantastic algorithm, a credit solution that assumes the best data is available, we know what the ecosystem is based on this thing that I just showed you, right? 85% of the market does not have that kind of data. So the ecosystem is not yet ready. So as an innovator, you cannot design a solution assuming the best case scenario. As I just shown here, your data quality will power innovation if you are based on data. And this is only the start. This quality of data driving your innovation, and the ecosystem has to be ready. And a lot of you may be familiar with this slide that I'm going to show you. So you are the CIO or the Chief Digital Officer. And most of the times, I would say 100% of the time, you have to deal with seemingly conflicting requirements, right? Again, talking of the ecosystem. You are not going to design for one category, one segment. You have to address the so-called India. At the same time, your solution has to address the tier 2, tier 3 cities, Bharat. The folks in metro may say that I want a do-it-yourself system. We are digitally savvy. It has to be one-click system, all of that. It has to be the best experience. Whereas the Bharat part of it, you may have to provide an assisted solution, paper-based solution. There has to be a need to be inclusive, adaptive, support local languages. So it is like balancing multiple seemingly conflicting solutions when you have to design this kind of a data platform. So it is again very clear that as an innovator, you have to worry about the ecosystem. You have to worry about what is around you, and you cannot be working in isolation, designing the best possible algorithm. Right? So even after addressing all these factors, we haven't even addressed the elephant in the room. Yes, you can define a fantastic architecture, design a fantastic solution, do it for a global scale. A lot of us have done it. But at the end of it, your compliance has to be local. And it varies from geography to geography. Just taking, for example, the privacy part. So India and Singapore talked about essentially mandated specs. EU has very stringent laws. And US says basically pretty much do whatever you want. Right? And the data residency varies from country to country. So for example, if you are innovating something, developing a solution, and you have to take it to the Southeast Asian market, for example. Southeast Asia is made up of 13, 15 countries. So can you provide this solution in 15 different data centers in each one of these countries? Are you equipped to do that? Is the ecosystem supporting a single shared instance, or do you have to do 15 different instances? What about compliance for each one of these countries? You need to have the solution that can work with 15 different local compliance and rules. So can you handle all of that? So is the ecosystem ready to support whatever innovation you are doing? Right? So fortunately, it's not all lost. It's not, I mean, it was a tough problem quite some time back. But what we feel is there is hope. And interestingly, India is leading the way. And in many cases, we are far, far better than most of the other so-called global players. So if you see here, so I, as an individual, own my data. So especially in the context of the ongoing WhatsApp Signal kind of a discussion in practically all of our WhatsApp groups, this becomes very important. I own my data. So I provide my consent so that anyone who is using my data need to take my consent to do this. There are strong regulations, mechanisms being put in place by regulators like RBI. So regulations such as account aggregation, they are being defined with strong consent-based mechanisms. These consent-based systems are being developed, certified, deployed. And these are interestingly sector agnostic. So these are very, very extensible to other domains, need not be just fintech. And then the experience with UPI is phenomenal, right? So not only it demonstrated the scale, but it also addressed the other issue I talked about earlier, which is how do you address different segments, whether it is Bharat, local languages, or the tech-savvy metro person. So it's demonstrated all of that. And then moving one level above, at the government level also, we see very, very interesting policy decisions, whether it is pushing ease for PSU banks, or financial inclusion, or credit enabling through Open SME credit enabling. So all of this, we see clear signal from the top saying that we are willing to go the extra mile so that the innovation can happen. So we see a lot of positive thing happening in the ecosystem level that the innovators can take advantage of. So going back to my earlier example of Perfius, now with the regulator driving account aggregation, privacy laws in place, and the enabled technologies, whether it's in privacy or security infrastructure, the same solution it's taking off much faster than we tried a few years back. So only this morning, actually, we were presenting to an RBI Innovation Council as to what should be done to fast track fintech innovations. The regulators and the ecosystem are ready to help and extremely responsive now. So it's a great time for an innovator trying to roll out new solutions with a lot of ecosystem being pushed to be in sync with innovators. And as an innovator, of course, you need to look around to see if the ecosystem is also ready to support the innovation being rolled out. Obviously, both of them have to be in sync. So what I feel is, while yes, it was difficult a few years back, we have seen significant progress being made, both on the ecosystem side, whether it's regulators or compliance or enabling technologies or other infrastructure, and the innovators working closely with all of them in order to ensure that we make significant progress in this space. So thanks for listening, and I'm willing to take any questions.